Good morning. My name is Preston Davis, and our subject this morning is fiscal policy. What is it, and why should you care? My purpose this morning will first of all be to define fiscal policy and identify its components. Then I'd like to point out how fiscal policy, which is set by our Congress, affects not just us, but our children, our grandchildren, and all future generations. Then I'd like to contrast Republican and Democratic ideas on how to use fiscal policy for our economy, for our nation, and talk about what we can do now, today, to affect fiscal policy. Fiscal policy affects future generations and can be used as the Republicans' terrible swift sword to shrink government to the point where they can drown it in a bathtub, or as a tool to create jobs and grow our economy. To understand fiscal policy, we first have to understand gross domestic product. I call this our economic pie. It is made up of consumer spending, government actions, business investments, and net exports. Note that consumer spending is the component with the greatest impact. If we want to grow our economic pie, that is where we should concentrate our efforts. Remember, gross domestic product measures the size of the economic pie we all get to share. Let's look at that in a different way. Let's look at it as an equation, where gross domestic product is equal to consumer spending plus government actions plus business investment plus the net exports. This is a strange equation because government actions, the G part of this, affect consumer spending. They affect business investment, and they affect net exports. And it is these government actions which we call fiscal policy. So what can the government, the G part of this, do to grow the pie through fiscal policy? Let's look at the different components of fiscal policy. The first one would be taxation. The second one is government purchases of goods and services, as if they are the consumer. Then I like to break up what most people call entitlements into government-issued insurance policies. These insurance policies will include Social Security, Medicare, and unemployment insurance. These are policies we take out when we are young. We pay into them throughout our working career, and they come due at a certain age. They are our right now. We own those policies. Then there are the pure entitlements. These are things our government does for the needy, for those who need help. And they would include food stamps, Medicaid, and unemployment benefits. And with this as a background, let's discuss Republican versus Democratic ideas on these elements. The first element was taxation. So let's discuss that first. Republican ideas on taxes. Let's see what taxes can do. Taxes affect money in consumers' pockets. They affect business activities. And they affect the price of imported goods through things such as tariffs. It affects the business activities through tax subsidies. It's meant to encourage various activities for businesses. We all know, I think, the Republicans favor low taxes. They think this will spur growth. Why? Because it means more money in consumers' pockets to spend. There's a big question, though. Will they spend it? They also say the tax subsidies for businesses will encourage them to expand and to hire. But will they expand and hire? These are big questions. And let's see what's happened. Actually happened in reality since enacting the Bush tax cuts. First of all, our economy has been buried under a mountain of debt. Businesses have hoarded hundreds of billions of dollars on their balance sheets rather than investing in America. And by the way, this business is the same private sector that's going to lead us to a better life after the government has been shrunken and drowned. Republicans believe that for-profit corporations will do a better job than government agencies and the employees there. Well, I spent 20 years of my life working with government employees. Without exception, they are hardworking, intelligent, and conscientious individuals working for the good of America, and definitely not concerned with corporate profits and executive bonuses. There are good things that can be done with business taxes. In his State of the Union speech, President Obama advocates lower taxes for companies that create U.S. jobs and penalties for those that create jobs overseas. Just exactly the opposite of what is happening today. Also note, since the Bush tax cuts, joblessness has boomed, and everybody's down in the dumps. And that's important because people do not tend to spend when they are down in the dumps. We've had historically low tax rates since 2001, and we're much worse off than we were then. When we feel worse off, consumer spending is weak, demand for products shrink, businesses have little or no incentive to grow or hire. This results in tax revenue decreases, mounting government debt, people going further down into the dumps, and then we start all over again at number one. My point is, lower taxes have not been good for our growth. Let's look at Republican ideas on spending. This would be government purchases of goods and services. Republicans want to cut spending. They first of all want to cut Social Security and Medicare. They do this under what I consider to be the false premise that they are high-cost items and will continue to be well into the future. Well, let's look at Social Security. It is an issue. Since 2010, Social Security taxes have not covered disbursements. However, there is a $2.7 trillion surplus in the Social Security fund in 2012. We collect interest on that surplus, and the interest being paid on that surplus is making up the difference so far. If nothing is done, however, in 2034 the surplus will be gone, and only 75% of expected disbursements will be covered by Social Security taxes. Well, what to do, what to do? Remember, I said this is an insurance policy. And what do insurance companies do if premiums don't cover expenses? Well, they're going to raise premiums. Currently, the Social Security withholding tax is not paid on income over $113,700. Most people pay 6.2% Social Security tax. However, the wealthy pay much less of their gross income. So an obvious way to raise premiums is to raise the cutoff rate to whatever the income level is that eliminates this issue. Maybe it's $200,000. Maybe it's $500,000. But there's got to be a number. The solution is not to cut Social Security. There are many other solutions being suggested by economists. One is to raise the Social Security tax rate by 1/20th of 1% per year over 20 years. This would bring it up to 7.2% in 2033. So, instead of saving 6.2% of their income toward retirement, people would save 7.2% of their income toward retirement. That is still a very good deal. About a tax of 0.25% on stock transactions. Currently, no capital gains tax goes towards Social Security. 5% Social Security surtax on adjusted gross income over $1 million is another suggestion being made. Start early benefits at 64 instead of 62. When full retirement age was 65, early retirement was 62, 3 years earlier. Well, right now, full retirement is 67. So maybe we back it up 3 years to 64. It's an idea to look at. The other thing I think about, and I never really hear much about it at all, is that a large part of this issue with Social Security is going to be baby boomers going through here. There was a huge surge in population between 1946 and 1960. They are now retiring. Those people born in that period of time are now retiring, but they're going to be 80 years old in 2026. We're not going to live forever. In fact, they'll all be in their well into their 90s, if not 100 years old, by 2050. This could just be a bubble going through for a short period of time. I don't hear that talked about or investigated at all. There are many potential solutions to this issue with Social Security. Cutting Social Security is not one of them. Republicans have been trying to kill Social Security since 1935, and we really can't let them do it. Let's take a look at Medicare. First of all, Medicare is not an expense. It takes in more in premiums than it spends, and it's projected to continue to make money until 2024. But after that, there could be an issue. So what to do? The The current premium for Medicare taxes right now is 1.45%. If we were to raise that tax to somewhere between 1.95% and 2.25%, economists say that will totally solve the problem. In fact, starting in 2013, some high-wage earners will pay an additional 0.9% Medicare tax. Incomes over $250,000 for married filing jointly, for example. This alone may solve the problem. But, Jeepers Creepers, do we even have a problem? There's something better to do, and that would be reduce the cost of health care. And that's exactly what Obamacare is designed to do, not only improve health care, but reduce its costs. Patients will now have insurance, so they will see doctors instead of getting critically ill and going to the emergency room. Obamacare stresses preventive medicine, so people will treat high blood pressure instead of waiting for kidney failure, dialysis, and kidney transplants. Obamacare stresses medical efficiency, so doctors work together, so they're not duplicating tests, or worse yet, having treatments that even contradict each other. They're rewarded for working together and increasing their efficiency. And another item is reducing fraud. There's been $14.9 billion recovered over the last 4 years under Obamacare. Medicare really is not an issue. It is a blessing for us all. Let's look at more foolhardiness for the Republicans. They want to cut items having to do with education, health, the environment, among other things. And notice that these affect lower and middle income Americans. Now, the average family sitting around the dinner table discussing money problems would not decide to stop feeding their children as a solution. They would conclude they must increase their income. And how would they do that? And lo and behold, that brings us to some Democratic ideas. Democratic ideas are to invest in America, grow the American economy, create jobs. Democrats are not looking to shrink and cut our economy. We're looking to grow our country. What is the best way to grow our economy? What comes to my mind immediately is job creation. Investments in job creation result in, first, people who are working. People who are working have money that they spend. Consumer spending, which is the largest part of gross domestic product, remember, means a larger pie for us all to share. Also means more tax revenue coming in. More tax revenue means a lower federal deficit. There'll be less income security costs, such as food stamps, unemployment insurance, Medicaid. This will also result in lower deficits. There are many things that we can do for job creation. For example, Mrs. Obama has initiated a Joining Forces program, which aims to assist military veterans to find civilian jobs. There's going to be over 1 million military personnel transitioning back to civilian life over the next few years. And Mrs. Obama is pressing states to pass legislation or take executive action to allow veterans to receive professional credentials or licenses based on their experiences in the military. For example, credentials and licenses for commercial driving, nursing, emergency medical services. This would help to build America, create jobs, prevent unemployment, provide a source of pride for veterans instead of the sense of hopelessness too many of them are feeling now. Ideas of this type are what America needs now. What are some of the best places to grow? Well, an obvious one is infrastructure, including our environmental work, health, education, to name a few. Let's take a look at infrastructure, some of the things that can be done there. If you were the CEO of a large corporation, would you invest in a country with deteriorating roads and bridges? In his State of the Union address, President Obama stated that there are some 70,000 structurally deficient bridges in the United States. So it was just a little over 5 years ago that the Interstate Highway Bridge collapsed in Minnesota. 13 people were killed and 145 injured. Yet today the country still has a bridge repair backlog of $64 billion, according to the Federal Highway Administration. The American Society of Civil Engineers estimates deficiencies in the nation's infrastructure will cost the country almost $1 trillion a year in lost business sales. That translates to 3.5 million jobs. The Transport Institute has identified roadways in urgent need of repair around New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Atlanta, our major business hubs. Our entire interstate highway system is mostly built in the 1950s, and much of it is in need of repair. It's not just roads. Such things as waste and drinking water projects are particularly underfunded. We also need an improved power grid, high-speed rail, and so on. There is so much to do in this area to help our country grow, and they will be investments with positive rates of return. And the President is not talking about the federal government doing this. He's talking about partnerships with private industry to rebuild America. Rather than more defense contracts, we should be issuing federal contracts to construction companies for infrastructure construction and repair. In the State of the Union address, President Obama proposed a Fix It First program to put people to work as soon as possible on our most urgent repairs. He also proposed a partnership to rebuild America that attracts private capital to upgrade what our businesses need most: modern ports to move our goods, modern schools worthy of our children, and so on. More federal investment is definitely justified and sorely needed in this area, and states alone cannot meet the need. Let's take a look at some of the other areas. Education. Spending on education amounted to 3.7% of government investment in 2012. This would be elementary, secondary, and vocational education, higher education, employment training. What we're looking at here is government and business cooperation in developing things such as high-tech schools and adult vocational training. Equip the people with the skills they need to get good jobs. In the State of the Union address, President Obama spoke of establishing manufacturing hubs where businesses partner with government agencies to turn regions left behind by globalization into global centers of high-tech jobs. He spoke specifically of such a hub in Youngstown, Ohio, where a once shuttered warehouse is now a state-of-the-art lab where new workers are mastering 3D printing, which I don't really understand, but it does have the potential to revolutionize the way we make almost everything. Obviously, for our nation to grow, we need a strong educational system. The area is ripe for additional investment that will provide a huge return on our investments. Let's look at health. Health spending in 2012 accounted for 9.5% of government investment. That excludes Medicare, but it does include health care, health research, training, and consumer and occupational health. Again, in the State of the Union address, President Obama stated the Human Genomes Project returned $140 to our economy through improved pharmaceuticals and treatments for every dollar that we invested in that program. Scientists are mapping the human brain to unlock answers to Alzheimer's. I had a very good friend since high school days. He was the president of a company he founded 30 years before, and also an excellent athlete. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's when he was 64 years old. He died at 72. Research on this hard disease is very important to us all. Other things we need in healthcare are training for new doctors and nurses and other health professionals. This will increase our nation's wealth through improved health for our citizens and assure that there are sufficient numbers of doctors and nurses for our future needs. What can we do now to affect fiscal policy? First of all, we can support our president in the things that he spoke of in his State of the Union address. Tax reform, job creation through government partnering with businesses, work on the environment. This is the wave of the future, and we should be the leader in this area. So, how do we fund growth? Two ways. The first one the president spoke of was tax reform. In a recent address to the House of Representatives, President Obama portrayed a tax overhaul as a way to achieve deficit reduction, arguing that the country could save hundreds of billions of dollars by getting rid of tax loopholes and deductions for the well-off and the well-connected. Also, a progressive tax policy, which provides lower taxes to lower and middle-income families. This is a good tax policy because lower and middle income families are most likely to spend the money on goods and services, driving demand higher and encouraging businesses to expand and hire. Higher income families tend to save the extra income, which does not contribute to needed growth. It contributes to the heirs maybe, but not to our country's growth. The president also told the House the American people deserve a tax code that helps small businesses spend less time filling out forms and more time expanding and hiring. A tax code that lowers incentives for businesses to move jobs overseas and lowers tax rates for businesses and manufacturers that create jobs right here at home. We need to get rid of outdated and unnecessary tax subsidies. They should be closed, and that would save us hundreds of billions of dollars. This would result in reduced national debt, increased consumers' confidence, increased spending, and more growth in our economy. Second way to fund growth, seems obvious to me anyway, is by investing in areas that have a positive rate of return. This will not only grow our economy and improve our quality of life, we will at the same time create a long-term, sustainable, low-deficit environment. And the best time to invest money is now, while interest rates are at historical lows. This may increase the deficit in the short term, but surely the types of investments we have talked about in infrastructure, education, health, and many others we can think of can be expected to return much more than the environment. This is the way to long-term sustainable deficit reduction and surplus creation and growth in our economic well-being. Cutting spending now, as the Republicans advocate, can only hurt our economy and stop the recent progress we have been having so far. Republicans believe shrinking our economy on the backs of the poor and middle-class Americans will lead to growth. They want to turn the economy over to the private sector, and everything will just work out okay. Well, in my mind, Democrats must retake control of Congress in 2014. We've got to do this to move our country forward with a Democratic majority in Congress in 2014. And here's a good thought. Republicans want to shrink our government and drown it in a bathtub? Well, in 2014, let's shrink the Republican Party to a size where we can drown it in a teacup. I much prefer that idea, thank you. What can you do immediately? One thing I've learned is handwritten letters to your representatives work extremely well. Much better than phone calls, much better than emails. They read those letters. If they get half a dozen letters or a dozen letters on the same subject advocating the same thing, they will pay attention to this and act on it. Phone calls and emails will certainly help. And not just you. Don't you just do this. Encourage your children to do this. Encourage your older grandchildren to do this. The more people that can bring handwriting letters and making phone calls, where can I find the information to contact my representatives? Well, your local newspaper will probably list their contact information, their addresses and telephone numbers. The telephone book should list your local representatives' addresses and telephone numbers. You're not limited to just contacting your own representatives. You can contact any senator or any representative. You can find their contact information by going to either senate.gov or house.gov. And there are many websites that are also available to you. TheVillagesDemocrats.com, for one, for example, would have our representatives. So please keep in mind these things that you can do. This is a very vital subject for all of us. Remember, you're also thinking about your children and grandchildren. So please, let's work hard to retake our Congress in 2014 and to grow our economy so that we all benefit. Thank you very much.